Council meeting will resume at 5:13.
Ready for the exciting stuff?
Yes, go, continue, city manager.
Okay, so if you look at, so I'm on this little packet right here. Really, the one thing I really wanted to draw your attention to was the change with regard to the projected allocations that HDL
Yeah.
does for us. So keep in mind, they do a projection for us every year. They also have a projection instrument that they provide to us that allows you to do about a 5-year projection on property tax. So one of the questions that I have had over time was to say, how accurate was their forecast to what we actually booked? So I'll get in that in just a second. I've actually taken a snapshot of that. So, but if you look from '01 to 2006, not surprisingly, you grew on a compound annual growth rate of 20% in terms of your property tax collection. So then you begin to look what happened to you in '07 to 2011. You're at 14.1%. Of course, we know what happened again between to '08, '09 period with the collapse. But when you look at the 5-year period from 2011 to 16, you had a 5.4% growth rate. So where you're at today, over the last 2 years, you're now back up to 7.7% rate of growth on your AV. And so a couple factors that begin to contribute to that are a recovery of assessed value. So based on Prop 8 and 13, remember you lost about 25% or so of your AV on residential during that time period. So that recovers a little bit quicker over about a 3 to 4 year period. So if you really try to begin to break it down in terms of what you saw during the entire period of '01 to 2018, you're about 12.4% compound average annual increase in assessed value. The recovery period from 2013 to 2018, you've been growing at about 9.3%. Okay, so again, the purpose of that exercise, outside of really, really interesting information, was to really kind of, again, get a feel for what that cycle looks like for you guys over time. So the next page on the secure property tax revenues, again, you can see those percentages that I was referring to. So if you look on the top where you've got the just the non-colored portion of the tables, you can see 2008 to 2017, the distribution of your revenue as a percentage of the overall levy that came in those years. Again, you can see that you dropped down to that 76% ratio in 11 and 12 where you bottomed out. But you climbed back out of it within about 4 years, because you had recovering values and you started to pick up with development again. But the more interesting aspect to this was to see the relatively little difference in the proportionate share of commercial and industrial value that came in. So you saw that percentage rise a little bit on those areas because they don't fall like the residential does. But you didn't have any real significant amounts of growth during all that time period. You had a little bit of growth, but that value kind of held for you. So if you go down to that next series, this books for you the actual percent change in the levy year to year for each class of property that you have. And really, when you get to the final synthesis of it and you look over on the far right-hand column where the total is, and that's where you saw that graph a little earlier with the 13.6 and minus 3% to level. So what's interesting is you begin to see the resurgence of a identifiable trend. So you come back out, you swung back up, you now have 18 and 10%, which was recapturing that loss. and then you start to level back out again. So you can see a wave that's starting to come. And if you think about the conventional economic wisdom of a 7-year cycle, economic cycle, you can begin to see, hey, maybe this curve begins to roll into that 7-year cycle. So again, if you move on to the next page, you can see again the average collection. And one of the things we've talked to our citizens a lot about is the relatively low impact that property taxes have on the community in terms of a per parcel basis. So collectively, it's a significant number, but when you look at the price or the costs for service delivery per home or commercial property, we definitely have a lot larger cost per parcel to deliver service than what is being generated in taxes. So sales tax, franchise fees, fees for service are areas we have to go to. And keep in mind, the tax apportion or the tax rate is set in Sacramento by statute. So you have no discretion in changing the tax rate. So that's where those CFD services and drilling into those is so vitally important in really figuring out how exactly we're using those. Not only for transparency, but also we kind of need to, that's going to help you develop kind of your strategy a little bit over time.
So each residential parcel, each home is generating $214 in revenue for the city.
That's correct. That's correct.
And that is what we could increase if we are able to renegotiate our annexation agreement.
Correct. So that represents about 25% of a newly annexed home. So
Okay.
keep in mind, this averages all your residential properties. So even properties that are not subject to the annexation provision are included in that average. So if you look at the average new home, it may be a little bit higher because the values may be higher for the newer construction.
Okay.
So it may be a little bit more than that, probably not a lot, not significantly. So then you get down to that final piece and you look at the HDL secured property tax revenues versus actual. You see the performance of their estimates. So overall, over the long term, it's a good model. It gives us a good idea. But what this indicates to me is that the model really isn't sensitive to our specific ebbs and flows. When you look at it, looks more like a straight run kind of model. And so there are some tweaks that you can do within their model to kind of adjust, some of those factors. But overall, the information they've been providing in their annualized preliminary reports are pretty good. Where you miss it, where it was missed, is in 2010. And then again in 2017, we came short about 178,000 in those years.
And these are estimates. For example, the 2009 estimate would have been, when would that number have been estimated?
That number gets estimated right about this time of the year. So
For the next year.
Right, for the following year. And so then you take their estimate and then you can choose to drop that into your budget forecast.
Do they do a multi-year estimate so that, because I think what you brought up with the fact that it's almost a straight line increase, if in 2008 they had estimated the next 5 years, it's likely that they would not have done what you were doing in our budget, which is to assume at some point there's going to be a downturn.
Well, and they don't provide that to us. They go year to year,
Okay.
and they're reporting on all the different facets that go into calculating what the AV is and then what the city's apportionment of that tax bill is going to be. A lot of states you can go and you go to see, hey, what's my tax rate? It's like, well, we're charging you 50 cents per $100, so okay, now I kind of know. California doesn't happen that way. There's tax zones, there's apportionment factors, there's all these different things that go into it. So it's not a straight run, hey, this is what my tax rate is. So on the property tax portion, Melrose and your others is a different structure. So what they have to do is they're going through all the synthesis of the formulaic requirements to calculate the city's levy. And so that is based on factors from the prior year and then additional growth that happens. But they've provided now a forecasting tool that allows you to try to push that out over a 5-year period. And so I'm going to show you my model run on that. One of the questions that we need to work through that's not really quite clear to me, and it's really not quite clear in our budgets and in terms of our other financial documents. And there's two elements of property tax that are out there. One is the secured property tax, and the other is the unsecured property tax. And so the tax assessments are collected at the county, and then those are apportioned out through the county back to the cities according to the formulas. And so when we get our allocation is just the property tax. So it's not really clear in the forms whether it's secured or unsecured. So is everybody familiar with secured and unsecured, what that is?
I know, the unsecured is the personal.
It's personal property, exactly. So it could be inventory, it could be leased vehicle, it could be mechanical equipment in a building, those types of things. The secured is literally land or buildings or permanent fixed structures or improvements. Anyway, so that's that piece of it. So any questions on any of that stuff? It seems like I'm beating it to death, but I was proud of myself and it took 6 weeks to figure it out. Okay,
This is good.
so that next little, yep, right there, right there, that's it. Okay, all right, so now this thing is a population forecast, housing forecast that tries to push out to 2037. What does push it out? So one of the concerns is, okay, as we look at our forecast in terms of growth and AV, and we begin to look at fee revenue and other things, there's going to be a shift at some point in the city where we've got all new growth and we're going to slow down that growth and then redevelopment and different kind of permitting, different kinds of work in the city. So the question really is, what does the saturation look like and what does the growth look like in terms of population for the city as a whole? And so we know that there's about 5,500 or so remaining entitled lots that are currently left to be developed. We know that Banning is going to start to see some significant development in the next couple of years, and we know Calamasa is going to see it within the next year, year and a half. So there's going to be competition, within our area for some of that housing, particularly for the new housing. So what we tried to look into was, okay, and we also know houses are going to transition also. So at some point, new product is going to gentrify and new families are going to begin to take over some of those areas. And then we have whole demographic shifts that can happen, but that's a discussion for 5 years from now, right? Not tonight. But what this shows you is really what the growth what a growth model looks like to consume about 6,400 single-family lots over the next 19 years. And if you look at what our level of permitting activity has been over the last, since the recovery, we've been right at 450 or so lots, new homes permitted every year. Now, that doesn't mean that you've got 450 people moving in every year, because construction can lap over from fiscal year to fiscal year. So if you go back and you look at the actual single-family homes finalled year to year, you can begin to get a clearer picture with regard to what the actual population growth can be. So what I did is, I took 2 years of building permit activity, and then based on the percent growth or change you can see the percent permitted in terms of single-family homes finalized. So it ranges from 47% to 89%. But basically, it averages out to about right at 40%. So if you look at 2 years of permitting, about 40% of those new home permits are converted into final homes. So the formula here would be, these are permitted for 2 years, and then, so for example, if you look at 2022 and 2023, that's 400 homes permitted, 160 homes occupied. And our current demographic is about 3.2 people per household, which then allows you to calculate how many people you've added, permanent people you've added in that year. And then if you take the existing population estimate, and these population estimates through 2017 are the state's population estimates for the city as of January 1. So you're assuming then here's what your population growth looks like going forward. It's not perfect. I mean, there's timing issues of population, but if you look at, I think, the offsets of population growth during the year and then the fact that people are transitioning in over a period of time, I think it more or less averages out. But what this means ultimately is that under this model, by the time you get to 2037, you got 64,500 people. This is a little bit lighter than SCAG. So, you know, other things that we'll look at is what does the SCAG model look like, and then what does our model look like. But again, SCAG is a good tool. On the long run, I think it's been fairly accurate for us, but it's not sensitive to local conditions and local trends. So I think this kind of gives us an idea. I think this gives you one model to think about, and SCAG is kind of the comparator that we can kind of benchmark to. But so you're probably saying to yourself, Todd, why are you bugging us with this right now? But a lot of the service levels that we're talking about are population-based service levels.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about police, when we talk about parks needs, when we talk about programming over multiple years, you know, what do we need to be able to provide?
Right.
So we want to look at the UCR, for example, and look at crime statistics on a per thousand population basis for our city and for our area. If we know our population range, we can say, hey, this is what it's going to be. Now we can begin to better forecast how many personnel we need to address that need, for example. So,
Are you, is the slowdown prediction there at the 22, 23 that you're factoring in for the numbers to go down?
yes. Yes, and that trend is modeled against, so I took that 5-year model, that wave model, I've applied that to the building permit activity. I've looked at over the last, you know, since we got past the recession, I've been looking at what the level of permitting has been in the city. And again, I'm anticipating that, you know, by the time you get to 2028, you know, we're starting to see some significant competition, and we're seeing build out of the city that we'll start to see a lessening of the rate of growth within our city. Is really kind of what this one contemplates. But this wave follows the 5-year wave that I described a little bit earlier. So we're trying to sync everything up so everything's hitting.
You know, I noticed in 17 and 18, the permit count of single-family homes permitted and final over those 2 years as well as the next few years, you never really seem to get equal. In other words, if you look at the 4 or 5 years before that, there's about a $400 or 400 unit discrepancy between the ones that are permitted and the ones that are final. What happens to those 400 homes?
Well, what happened in, for example, if you get to 2017, remember we had a bunch of homes that were permitted, bulk permits, because they're getting ahead of the impact fee change.
Okay.
So a number of those home permits are being terminated because they rushed in to try to entitle those permits, and so a number of those are going to evaporate because they're not going to effectively develop those homes. So they'll come back and re-permit some of those lots.
Okay.
Because we had a rush, I don't know.
So overall, that's why you're not 1 for 1 at the bottom line for those.
Right. That's right. That's right. So.
And you said there's about 6,400 homes entitled, and these numbers go out to 2037. If a new development were to come in that was not yet entitled, what kind of process are you looking at? A time frame? Does it go from entitlement to homes in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Or?
Well, I think we're closer to 5,500, so this would assume that you've got another 900 entitled units that start to get permitted. So this model itself is going to require some additional permitted or entitled subdivisions to come in.
Okay,
So-
ones that are not entitled right now.
Right, so this has a little bit of additional, this got some assumptions coming in that you're going to have another couple projects that could be entitled in this time frame.
And are those just projects you're just building in for a conservative estimate, or are they projects that you already are sort of
So
have a heads up on?
Yeah, just contemplating, no, it's nothing we have a heads up on, but it's just contemplating, you're gonna have some additional available property. And so somebody's gonna want to develop that or entitle that. Large holdings may convert to other buyers who are gonna put the property into production.
Okay.
So there's some things there. And then we've made a little bit of a light stab at multifamily. I mean, not a lot of multifamily, new to multifamily is happening in the Inland Empire. So, but we do figure at some point that it's gonna have to happen. We've got the Sunny Cal area, single family that'll go. That's already kind of factored into our overall entitled count. But we don't have anything really new in terms of multifamily that's really entitled. But we've got the urban center, the village center, there, the Denley piece, that is the location where you've got your multifamily density on that property that is part of your housing element. So, you know, we know that at least they're talking about trying to do something to develop that property over the near future. So that's where you could pick up some more lots. That's certainly where you could pick up multifamily.
Are population estimates on multifamily similar to single resident, 3 point whatever?
They're a little bit lighter, so we factored in 2.5 per unit for the multifamily here. You know, one of the things that the state has identified is that affordable housing is a major obstruction to continued economic development. So there's been a lot of discussions about limiting cities' ability and counties' abilities to regulate height and density of subdivisions, and particularly multifamily. So we don't know. I mean, at some point, you got to think that with the lack of competitive, available multifamily or transitional housing, that's going to have to come. And so that's why these models are going to have to be, there's so many moving parts, they're going to have to be considered every year. We're going to have to go back and relook at this every year as we go. But at least we're trying to get an idea, and not that we would budget to 2037, but at least in terms of looking at what their potential programming would need to be is over the next 5 to 10 years is really how I would propose to use this. Would y'all be generally comfortable with this model? And we'll refine it. This won't be the last you see it, I promise.
Todd, when you use the term homes permitted, are you talking about, and then, because you also talked about homes that were applied for to beat a fee. And usually in the county, I found that they'll apply for them and they'll let them sit in either like a plan check or applied status, and they won't actually be issued where you're breaking ground. When you have homes permitted, are you talking about both issued and applied for that are maybe just sitting idle waiting for? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You know, if you look at the heyday, you know, so 2000 and early 2000s, the city was issuing up to, there's 2 years you issued over 2,000 permits. I just can't foresee that happening. You were brand new, the economy was humming, but you've not come close to that again. You know, developers I think will be more conservative. They're not developing larger chunks like that. So, plus I think you have competition. You have to factor that in. Okay, and again we'll benchmark it. My plan is you'll have a section of the discussion component of the budget, which will have a review of this. And it'll talk SCAG, it'll talk this, and what the discrepancies are and why, and which factor that we're relying on. So there'll be a discussion of all this stuff in the budget document. Okay. All right. Talk about the magic now. Okay, so I'll take you to the rainbow graph chart. So, what this chart has, so if you look first at the property portion of the taxes, you'll see from 2004 to 2017, the actual revenues that were generated in property tax. And one of the things, for example, in 2017, when you look at the revenue that was generated in property tax versus the budget, there was a significant difference in the actual property taxes realized. And so that's where I think you're seeing some of the implications of the unsecured taxes coming in. Because if you go back and you look at the I won't say forecast, and you look at some of the budgetary efforts that were taken, they were looking at the secured side. So we've got to do a drill down to really figure out how much and kind of what that structure is, what it means coming in. We don't have that clear picture today. So if you look at, and again, this is built off, HDL is what I used to help build some of this data. So how this works under this model. So this year we have budgeted $3.4 million in revenue coming off of secured property tax. Okay, so you see that total of 3.4. To date, there's about 2.4 million of that 3.4 that's been collected to date. So there's about 29% left to collect off the budgeted amount. However, again, you collected 4.1 million in 17. And one of the things that I talk about that is that you would normally like to have is you like to have a cash flow analysis that would tell you these 2 times of the year is when you get your money. And it's roughly this much of it you get. So right now, we're not able to, I can't tell you how close that 3.4 is, how much extra we may get. We don't have enough information to really know that we can rely on. So, although this may be a little bit conservative, but the projected unsecured property tax levy that HDL reported for 17 was $718,000. So if you look at that, you'd say, based on the property tax forecast and the 718 of the unsecured, that would generate about $4.1 million of property tax. And when you go back and you look at 16 and 17, they were right at 4.1 million. So again, it's just something we need to watch and see kind of what's going on and drill down and visit with the county some more and kind of figure some of that out in a little bit more detail. So
you had said that we've received 2.4 million so far.
Yes.
How do you come to 720 as the change at this point? On the blue column, first blue change column.
Just based on, just kind of on the run. So if you look at, okay.
So, are you estimating that, we've collected 2.4 and we'll collect another 300,000? Or is there something else that?
Yeah, based on your budget. So based on the budget, okay? So if you look at the 4.1 million that was actual collected revenue in 17, and the 3.4 we have budgeted, that's a $720,022 difference between what the actual was to what the budget is. So that was my starting point for this. And then when you go through.
Wait,
and
I'm sorry, can you say that again, please?
Right, so if you go to the revenue, the actual revenue for 17,
Right,
it's 4.120022.
Okay.
And then the 3.4 is, so that's a simple subtraction of the 3.4 from the 4.12. And I'll explain why that starts off that way in a little bit. But
okay.
so if you look at that basis, then in terms of the forecasted property tax revenue, you would have seen a reduction of 720.
Okay, so that is not a year-to-date figure?
Correct.
or
That's a
anything.
budget. That's this year's budget number there. Okay. So, however, we know that there's unsecured value levy that's calculated at 718. So then if you say, well, heck, if you say the 3.4 plus the 718 is 4,118,000. Now that's only a $2,022 difference between the total taxes collected for 17 and what our forecast looks like, plus the 718 that was projected for this year. But again, we don't have a data set we can say the 4.1 is right or the 3.4 is right based on what's going to roll up into our budget and to our general fund. We don't know. That's an unknown right now. Unless Milano's learned something.
But right now, it is at 2.4 year to fiscal year.
2.4 is what we've got today. Correct. So based on 3.4, you're at 61%.
That 2.4 is not including unsecured?
Don't know. I can't tell you. We don't. I'm sorry, I wish I could tell you, but I don't know. I hope it does, because then that would push us closer to that 4.1. Okay, so now, based on this projection, then you say, okay, we have development that's happening this year. So we say, okay, based on the additional new value that would be projected to have been added to the city in 2018, what I'm forecasting is about $300 million of new construction that's adding value to the tax base for next year. Activity from this year that rolls into next year. Okay, so that's that new value column. But before we go there, let's look at that growth from 3.4 million to 3,621,000. So what I'm contemplating there is that you see an increase in the overall assessed value for the properties that were on the tax roll from the prior year to this year. And based on that 5-year model, you know, we saw 2 years of the big increases, and so we have a declining rate of increase in value. So then we have the 300 million. So that represents a change from 3.4 to 362 based on increased property value or increased market value. So then you say, okay, secured grew by 300 million in value during the year. Here's the tax rate, the city's share of the rate, okay? So that generates another $282,000. So the 3,621 plus the 282 gets you 3,824,000 for your secured.
I'm sorry, where's your 282, my Paul?
So, okay, so look at the 300 million.
Right,
Yeah, and then apply the city share of the tax at 0.09 and then a bunch of decimals.
oh, okay, there's a 281,952.
Right, and then that
Okay,
generates
so
you
there's your three.
$202,000.
I'm sorry, 300 million, and then what?
300 million, then you apply the 0.093 ... tax rate, city share of the tax
Yep,
rate, and then that gets you to another $282,000 of projected property tax revenue
Okay.
for the year. So then you add the new value, the new revenue, to the increase on the value of the prior year. Okay, so we've got this continual building process of value.
right.
Okay. So between the increase in market value that goes onto the appraisal roll and the addition of taxes being generated by new development, that yields about a 12.5% overall increase in secured property taxes. So then we have this, the unsecured, you say, okay, unsecured, and I just put a modest growth to the unsecured property tax, because again, that's getting into commercial, it's getting to other things. So, so that grew to, under this model, to 732, so now your tax levy would, under this model, go from 4.1 to 4.6, for a total of 10.7% increase in levy. Okay, so that's the methodology behind it. So now you can see very clearly the model. So now go back to the left-hand most three blue columns and look at the percent change. You can see that percent change is following the percent change model that I've looked at. So I've got that 5-year cycle. So we've got the 6.5% for this next year. And then based on what we've seen as the trend, economic trend, we're due for a downfall, which, based on the fact that 80% of our population value is still residential, we're going to be very susceptible to that if the county applies the same process to reducing the values that they did last time. Because remember, when the value started backsliding, the way the tax code works is you have an opportunity to appeal your valuation to the county and request relief based on the market value. It was so bad and there was such a significant impact that the county just decided to go ahead and make the decision and do it countywide. Hey, we're just going to go ahead and do this for all the residential properties in the county. So that happened. So that's another option that the county has. They can either do it or they can wait and process on a petition by petition basis. Okay. So if you assume it's that bad again, which is what we're hearing, is we're heading into the same kind of situation, the trough. We're here, now needing to begin to take a loss on value. And that 15, 6, 4, and 0 is consistent with the overall value. So I didn't go and, because this overall levy includes commercial and industrial and residential and vacant property. So by taking this approach, I felt like in taking the average of the overall city average, then it was taking into account those other factors with the different deviations in land use. Otherwise, you'd have to break it out by estimating percentages of growth within each one of the land use factors and then apply different factors. So I didn't go to that.
Wasn't that easy?
I could do it for you if you'd like to.
Question, Todd. You're showing the dip or the adjustment, however you want to call that, in 2020, right? Do I understand that?
Yes.
Okay. But on your population forecast, it looks like you're showing it in 2022.
Because I think there's a lag.
Okay.
I think there's a lag because you've got things in process, you've got development
to catch up.
happening. And so as everything slows down, you begin to get a retraction on the property tax. You're still going to have development that's going to happen.
Kind of like the 2008 to 2010 thing,
Yes.
right?
So you got an overlap. That's going to
Okay. All right, thank you.
I really never wanted to be a demographer. I really didn't.
Well, I'm glad that you look at that dip, because a lot of the budget forecasting models they like to see the pie in the sky kind of thing.
Well, and
And that concerns me.
well, and the thing that I'd say I've lost sleep, I know y'all have too, over all of this is the volatility of it. And, people are counting on services, staff is counting on supplies and salary adjustments. And so I just want to make sure that we're in a comfortable enough window that we can respond to it.
I appreciate that.
Okay, so, all right, so what you'll see, so I've got two more 5-year cycles where we have the same consistent level, and then you'll notice the recovery. So in 2031, we go from 0 to 7.5. So basically, I've cut the growth in that 11 to 15 year of that cycle to about half, because again, we're significantly built out by that point. So there's a slowdown. We won't have as much new growth added. Likewise, if you look at the new value column, so we start at 300 million. And, we've added, for example, if I remember correctly, right around a little over 400 million was added to the roll for last year. So this is assuming about 75% of that growth has happened, that same level of growth has happened for next year. But again, in contemplation that we've got a slowdown coming, every other year I've reduced that added value by 20%. So 300, you drop to 240, and then you drop to 192, the year after that. So again, kind of contemplating slowdown, things are going to go on. But, one major business development could change these numbers, and that would be good. And you can see, you go back and look at the revenue generated per parcel of commercial and industrial, that's a much better return per parcel than, although it's a lot more land. Anyway, so I'm really getting too far in the weeds. So anyway, so just know that in looking at that new value column, that it does factor in a slowdown over time. And hopefully that averages out. Okay. And you can see ultimately what this model shows. So then you get to the sales and use tax. So you get down to the compound growth rates. So if you look at the actuals from 04 to 17, you have that 10.7% compound average growth rate over that time period. So if you look at the model that we have forecast that basically takes you from 2017 to 2035, and you add in the secured, which grows at 2.5% compounded because you got the waves, and you've got about a 2% factored in on the unsecured. When you bundle all that together, that comes out to a 3.3% compound average growth rate when you look at that. So then you get to sales and use, and you can see that. So I've got us growing a little bit for the next couple years, and then it begins to level off, and it just kind of flattens out at that rate. Kind of contemplating. And with this, I haven't broken this out, but you got to contemplate. We'll have the fixed, and then we'll have the pooled. So we've got the local and the pooled sales tax. So the local is what's generated with local brick and mortar sale, and then the pooled is what's brought in statewide and countywide that goes into the overall pools, and then there's a distribution frequency that then distributes out those sales taxes based on the population formulas that are out there. And I can't tell you what the formula is, I apologize, but I can tell you it does come. And I've seen some numbers that talk about what that number looks like. So anyway. Okay, so that was pretty exciting, wasn't it?
It's been busy.
Was that awesome or what? You feel good?
That's
I can tell you're
Feel
excited.
energetic?
No, it is very good.
Yeah.
We're in the same forecast on this.
Goosebumps.
I know. Okay, so
When we interviewed you, you told us how much you like to get into the data and the numbers.
well, actually, I
I've
didn't.
really seen that.
I didn't do this at all. Sam did it actually.
I did.
Okay, so now we'll get into these. Right.
Okay.
So if we could, I'd like to start with this one. If y'all get it done. Unless y'all had anything else you want to talk about on this other? Really, we can talk all night.
We could.
Okay. So, in looking at a revenue forecast for next year, so all this stuff went into trying to get a handle on what our property tax look like. And again, this budgetary model follows the same model that we've been looking at, the same process where you look at the secured property tax. And so again, this reflects the 3,824,893. The unsecured isn't factored into this yet. So again, looking to see if we just need to try to track down, like I said a little earlier. But again, that represents that 12.5% increase from the 3.4 million that was forecasted or included in the current budget. So when you go back through, all the various factors that are out there, the different sources of it, kind of walk through. So the property transfer tax, again, it's been kind of a standard allocation that we've received. It really hadn't changed a whole lot. But the sales and use tax, again, we've got that growth of 4.5% to 5.3. Really looks like we're doing well this year. So kind of felt comfortable with a little bit more aggressive forecast on the sales and use tax for next year. The Measure A sales tax, you can see we've grown from 433 to 921. And that 921 is based upon the Measure A sales tax forecast that we did when we were negotiating with WRCOG. So that is we get 100% apportionment for the first 5 years that we're in the Measure A program. So we should get that entirety of that 921. And that seems to track with what's coming in. You can see this year, with it only being in for a few months, we've already got 147,000 of Measure A revenue. The motor vehicle and lieu tax, that tax revenue was created back in 2006, and I think it's 2006, and the state of California came and took some vehicle registration dollars away from cities that used to come in. That was used to help offset and kind of settle the state budget. In exchange, what happened is they created a property tax apportionment back to cities, which was in lieu of the vehicle tax, okay? And so that's a fixed amount that's calculated that comes back to the city based on prior year collection. So that should be a firm number, that 4.1 million. So that's a good number there. The rest are kind of following trends there. On the permits, what you can see is about a 15% bump on the public works and fire plan check fees. Building permit fees, I have a slight growth projected there of 1,324. We had projected 1.3 for this year. Remember we revised our building fees, just a little bit ago. So we're taking into account some increase in fee generation based on the projections. The reason why building permit fees are only at 1.9% is that we're breaking out planning from the building permit fees. So that's breaking that out a little bit more detail for us instead of combining those. The other things I was just going to highlight on the code enforcement, we had dropped our budget allocations for the current year to about $6,100. So this $35,000 really kind of more reflects what we're seeing. We just didn't know. We had so little history. We didn't know. We were more conservative on the number. Live skin fingerprinting was the same thing. That's been a pretty steady amount of revenue generated. Passport fees, the same thing. We thought that with some of the existing complications for travel, that might have an effect of slowing travel down, which would affect our passports. We haven't seen a slowdown. As a matter of fact, it seems like this year we've been busier than ever on processing and issuing passports. So this kind of takes us back up into our normal range there. Swimming pool, we've again kind of taking it back up to 22,000. Our pool fees, you can see at, we've generated about 11,300 already. And our pool season actually straddles 2 fiscal years, so we have swimming at the beginning of the fiscal year, then swimming at the end of the fiscal year at bookends. So it splits about in half. So we think we'll be right around 22,000 there, up from the 14. That was a significant increase. Miscellaneous copies, again, we have a lot of requests to process. So the abandoned vehicle program is really a pass-through through the county on through the sheriff's office. We've got that shared program. Those are dollars that just get allocated when they get allocated. So you can see those numbers fluctuate pretty significantly. We were anticipating a certain level of activity and money coming in that we just haven't seen yet. So to be a little bit conservative, I just kind of took it down to a low number. If we get more, that'll be great. Parking fines, again, kind of more tracking what we see traditionally. Then interest, we just still haven't seen the interest come around to what we'd seen. But overall, when you look at this, there's about a 6.4% increase in the projected from the current amended budget for fiscal year 18.
For the category 15, does that account for the new procedure that we just installed? Or we're going to?
Yes, sir.
Todd, on your fiscal year 2018, there's a 51.6 remaining in there, and we're already March 13 of the fiscal year. What do you expect to come in on remaining of the fiscal year?
I think we'll be close to that number.
Close to that?
Right.
Okay.
And that reflects what our last budget amendment was, so we were looking at trends. The big question really is going to be on that property tax. That's what I'm kind of keying in on most.
Does it come in on the April something?
May.
In May? Just the one? Okay. Yeah, because they're due on April 10, and then they transmit to us around May. Very good. Thank you, Alana.
And some of our
Take your
other
time.
franchise fees come in, and towards the end of the year, so
Okay.
we have to count on some of that. And then a big chunk of this transfers in, so we show 5.2 million of transfers over.
And also on the Measure A? Okay,
Yes, sir.
thanks.
And for the category 53, that cost recovery, that agreement was what, a 3-year agreement? On that for the,
Yes, for the SRO.
yeah.
It is. And that was calculated to cover personnel. It covers 9 months of the year. So there's 9 months of service provided through there. Also look at animal control. Animal control could change significantly. This doesn't reflect either the increased fees that we're going to have to collect for animal control because the shelter raised their fees. So there's going to be a pass-through on those fees, and so this needs to reflect that as well, because there's some companion increase on costs to provide service on the operating side. So we're a little bit of a backward delta on that.
So all total, though, we're about 51% then, remaining?
Remaining, yeah.
Yes.
But-
Remaining to collect.
And you anticipate getting that with less than half the fiscal year?
I think so.
Is there usually like an increase towards the end of fiscal?
Right, because your property tax comes in basically in 2 times in the year. And you've got your allocation on your motor vehicle in lieu, that comes in twice a year. So that's another 2.1 million. So
Okay.
that just those two alone is about 4
Okay.
million. And then the 5 million that you have on transfers in, that represents, so now we're already at 10 million 9 to 10 million just on those three items. And you got your franchise fees and some other things that should be coming in.
Exciting.
Keeps you on the edge of your seat.
When looking at the 5.1 transfers, I look at the last 2 years, and there's a big discrepancy between 16 and 17. Do you remember what that was? I mean, how do you know that the 5.1s is closer to the 17 versus the 16?
Well, because it's based on the actual expenditures that we have, so
Okay.
we're estimating, and that looks in at all your transfers in through governmental, through your CFD dollars. So there's a number of different sources that come in that kind of roll out to what your actuals have been.
So 17's not inflated by the transactions we did regarding the sewer fund.
Well, see, yeah, we had budgeted 6.1 in 17, but we actually only moved 3 million in 16, for example. So the 6.1, yeah, that would have been inflated by the payment that had been made.
Okay.
But that, those transfers are an additional point that Lon and I have been talking a lot about. So we're gonna, that's one we know we need to fine tune that line item. It's got to be right sized. But there's also a companion offset to expenses also.
So in category 47, I just have a couple of small questions. One of them, I have no idea what rail car fees are. That one's an easy answer, probably. What's rail car fees? Do we
So I turned to her.
charge a fee for rail cars?
There is a fee for, I believe it's new rail cars, or if a business who comes into the city wants to use rail car service on the railroad tracks. And we did have one of those last year, I believe, because I didn't know what that fee was
Yeah,
for.
there is
either.
one in 2018, and so it's not anything we can predict. It just happens, and then it's there.
Right.
That's
If
it.
commercial and industrial business really starts booming, then there's a real possibility that they would want to take advantage of the rail lines, so.
Okay, and the swimming pool, now I have to find where, the day camp program, for instance, that's the one I was interested in. So even though we think that the population is growing, the income is down, we think?
Yeah, 56, down by 10.
That one looks, it went from, 66,000 in 2017 to
56.
56 in 2018, but we think it's going to go up to 60,000. I guess why are we rippling?
Because that's your, and I think I think we may be a little light on the day camp number. I was just trying to be a little bit more conservative. We've got,
Okay,
the day camp program's been jam-packed, so we've got a lot of activity. And then there's some more programming that's been added to that as well, so.
okay. Thank you.
Utilization is pretty much maxed out, I think, unless we can come up with some alternatives, which I know that they have been working on a few different options. So it will force some fluctuations as people take advantage or decide they don't want to take advantage of certain things that they set up, so.
Okay. So it's just a conservative estimate at that point? Okay.
The interesting thing has been building rental. Building rental is shut off. I mean, I was talking to Bob, and he was letting me know last week that our building rentals were at capacity. We're at
That's what I
100%
thought,
capacity.
yeah.
We cannot possibly handle any more
Okay.
programming. So it's not a bad situation to be in, but all right. So we will key in on that number. We'll make sure we monitor that for sure. So the secured property tax, the sales tax, the franchise fees. So those will be included in things that we're really watching closely.
Can I have a quick one here? The abandoned vehicle program. On this one here, we got the, our forecast on this 53,000. And then the following year, in fiscal year 2019, down to 5,000. And then I'll squeeze it. In 2017, we got 12. Why so high on 2018?
It's really kind of out of our control. So
I know, I mean,
it yeah.
I'm just picking the number here right now, so, okay.
Yeah, so I felt it'd be better to be a little bit more conservative. And just,
That high? Okay.
yeah, we've had other be absorbed this year with other revenue streams, I think, but just.
Yeah, because the actual is 1,099. So,
And when you projected the increase for secured property tax for not residential, but for industrial and commercial, and you did the 300 million of potential assessed value. You did that based on the growth that's currently projected, such as Potrero and over by, so that doesn't include anything that would come our way in addition to what's already scoped out. Okay.
So I think it's a little conservative in that, we're expecting the lion's share of development to be single-family residential still. If we have some other major developments that occur, we likely wouldn't see the impact in next year.
Yeah.
It would be the year after. So there'd be probably about a two fiscal year delay before we started to see those effects. So we could factor that in, I think, in time to address that in year 2020, 2021. I have found that California takes a little longer to get stuff in the sky.
We don't move as fast as Texas.
I don't know, it depends.
What was the grant that we received for the category 45 for the intergovernmental?
I believe that was the Cal Recycle, so that helps to fund our recycle program. And so that, you see that dropped from 16 down in 17. It's, I think that was recycled oil. So that program's being handled a different way, so it's not through the cities anymore. So, but this is going into your recycle, your cleanup events, those types of things.
I'm good.
And I also have a prediction for Super Bowl 52, if you'd like to hear.
I
think the Broncos, Case Keenum.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
On this one here, we're seeing only general fund projections right now. Are we getting the waterways projection, enterprise, and all those projections?
Yes, sir.
Very good, sir. Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, we're doing this right now because this one's had much more moving parts to it. So, okay. All right. So, any other concerns on this? Okay. So, finally, the point I've been waiting for.
The food?
What is that?
Is that what we're waiting for?
What's that?
The food?
You missed it, man.
You got some food. Back in the You need some?
Yeah.
Would you like to take a break?
Yeah.
Do you want to take a break and then come back and do this? Is that a vote? Okay. Okay, so how much time do you want to take a break for? 20 minutes? 20 minutes?
Sure.
Okay.
Y'all are coming back, right?
Yeah,
And miss the last.
all right. So we will take a break and reconvene at 6:40. How's that?
All right.
It's good.
I
So
can't
nobody has to eat too fast.
wait. Pins and needles.
Excellent.